All organizations are dysfunctional. These are the words of Michael Wade, consultant, advisor, author, and former Equal Employment Opportunity Administrator for the city of Phoenix. And I tend to agree with him. We're just not that good at coming together to do stuff. We get in our way, we play politics, we blame, and we forget why we're even doing the damn thing in the first place. His solution? 3 words. Wait a minute. Remember waiting? Pressing pause for a second to look inward, to see if we're on the right track, to think? Remember thinking? Imagine waiting a minute before deciding to redo the entire deck when all it needs is a few word changes. Imagine waiting a minute before laying people off and realizing you could cut costs in a different way. Imagine waiting a minute before scheduling a meeting that could easily be an email. A few wait a minutes a day could save us hours of chasing down bad decisions and help us do everything better than we're doing it right now. Here's a good decision. Listen to Michael. He really knows his stuff. Welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast, the show where we cut through the BS and find ways to make work more fun, more human, and less ridiculous. All of which makes your business more profitable, by the way. Today's episode is a part of the ProHuman Series in partnership with the ProHuman Foundation, where Michael is an advisor. If you enjoyed this one, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Michael. Okay, Michael Wade, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here, Michael. I know we've known each other a bit over the last few years, but I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to our audience. So who are you? What do you do for work? How did you come to be doing it? What's your story?
I'm a management consultant in Phoenix, Arizona, and I focus on leadership, ethics, and equal opportunity.
Okay.
So those are my 3 main areas. And prior to going into consulting way back in 1984, I handled discrimination cases and issues for the city of Phoenix and for the United States Army Criminal Investigation Command in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Well, I did a lot of work in civil rights, and then later I carried that into consulting. And so that's always been one of my main areas of interest. Very keen on management. And early on, oddly enough, when I was in the Army, I was going through the Adjutant General Officer program, and there was a lot of information on management, and people were very excited about Peter Drucker, and we would regularly have tapes of his lectures. And I got hooked on how organizations operate. And what was interesting there was if you made a decision in Washington, D.C., what did it look like by the time I got to Germany or Vietnam or Korea?
Yeah. Wow.
And so that created kind of a innate skepticism as how organizations operate.
Yeah, there's certainly an interesting gap between theory and reality, or idea and implementation. And, one of the things that, one of the ways we're connected is you are an advisor through the ProHuman Foundation. And I'm a big fan of the work they do. And I've spoken with some others. And as you talk about this idea of how organizations work, I wonder, can an organization be pro-human? My take is that they often feel sort of not very human places. So what's your take on that, and what helps them become a bit more pro-human?
Well, I'm kind of a renegade in a way. I think all organizations are dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And the big thing is working on it to make it less dysfunctional. And that requires a lot of introspection, because you'll see organizations where they could really use careful scrutiny as to how they operate, and they can be fine people. That's one of the things to realize. You can have very, very nice people that will have very strange organizations. And I have to confess that if an organization is really weird, I don't take them on as a client, because it's just like a person, and I'm sure you've encountered this. The person and the organization has to be coachable. And if you sense that, gee, I'm just here as just kind of a cover story for whatever they're doing, then I'm not going to be there.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the big questions for all of us, because whether you're looking at organizations or you're looking at individuals, I believe that one of the core questions for our society is, how do you contribute to the creation of a nation that has better people? Because you can have you can have a nation with a great military and a great economy and a great innovation, but the question is, what sort of people are we producing? And to me, that's a big, big question nowadays, because I think we have a lot of pressures, social media, things of that nature, that can, in fact, harm the quality of the people.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I wonder, two things, how do we influence how we are creating people in a way that is done sort of within the bounds of freedom and democracy and all that stuff? Because I think there can be that tendency to want to use means outside of that framework. And then what I notice in the current state of the world, and you mentioned social media, and I think AI is contributing to this as well, is there's a speed at which we're moving that makes it really hard for what you were talking about, some of that introspection, to just pause and go like, who are we? Where are we? What are we doing? All that stuff. So how do you're working with people, you're consulting, you're coaching, you're doing all this stuff. How can you help people slow down even for a minute?
That's a great question. It's a big challenge because, and I've had to do this myself in terms of, I always have thought of myself as being a very patient person. And I'm not. And I really find, I like to get things moving. I get very frustrated if projects take too long. And yet we really have to take time out for ourselves and for other people. And there's so many times in which we see people where they send text messages or they send emails when they really need to go see the other person and listen to not only what the person is saying, but what the person means, and also listen very carefully for what is not being said. And because that's where a lot of the nitty gritty is. It's sort of like when you look at an organization chart, and you know that the real action is in the white spaces in between the boxes. And those white spaces, I think, are the things that we need to work on, because in many respects, we're all kind of, it's this man's search for meaning idea. We're searching for meaning. But I think healthy organizations also help people find their meaning.
That's an interesting idea.
I mean, it really, that to me, I think that's it. People say, well, what should my mission be? And in many cases, I'm saying help others find their meaning.
So I'm a CEO of a company. We make, an app of some kind.
Right.
And I'm trying to get people to buy all the stuff on that app. That's currently my mission. You walk in and you say, help your people find meaning. I feel like my first reaction is to be like, who are you and what are you talking about? Like, why would I help? Like, how is that my responsibility? So, and I mean that, in sort of the nicest way, I guess, just like, how do you connect that? So I want to come to you, and when you get that potential pushback, if somebody's like, I don't understand why that's my job. Why should it be their job?
Why should it be your job? Because it's going to help you find yourself. So there's a lot of self-interest in that.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the things in your life and you're flashing back in your life, the moments that you're probably going to be most proud of are the ones when you did something that was beyond or even outside of your own personal interest. And there was that larger purpose. And I think that's an important part of finding yourself. It is so often the case, I think nowadays, where we're marinated in careerism, and everything is you got to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And you're not even necessarily considering whether you should be going to point B. Maybe you should be going to point Z.
Right.
But I think that introspection is actually very beneficial. It's kind of like, at Amazon. In fact, I was thinking, when I was making some notes before this meeting, that two organizations I would mention would be Amazon and the Phoenix Fire Department. Amazon, in their warehouses, they have today as day one. And it's a reminder that every day is day one. And because otherwise you get too comfortable, you think everything's taken care of, and you're not as introspective and as urgent as you need to be. And then the other thing was the Phoenix Fire Department mission statement, and I think we've talked about this once, is, prevent harm, survive, be nice. And they say that's it. Yeah. Everything we do falls under. And I think as individuals, that's important. Prevent harm, survive, be nice. And part of being nice is being brave. There are times it involves being very frank. And so it's not a case in which we're just going to be kind of these squishy little kind people. Yeah. You have to operate with certain values. And that's, I think that's one of those introspection things. I was meeting with a person recently, and I said, I want to hear what you're going to do, but I also want to hear what you're not going to do. Tell me what's off limits. Yeah. Because that's, that can be even more informative. Yeah. And you see that with individuals where they're giving instructions. It's really helpful to tell people, if you're leading them, this is what I want to see, but this is what we need to avoid.
Yeah. So as a leader, I think sometimes that instinct is to focus on the things you want to see because it feels more positive, for lack of a better term, right? When you communicate the things you don't want to see, how important is it that you also communicate the reason behind it?
Oh, I think it's very important.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people will say, is this a death march? I mean, really, after a while. And a lot of organizations, it feels like that because you do this and you do this, and then they have more. And there's more to do and more to do. And they don't take time out to celebrate how much they've achieved. Yeah. Months ago, we were in a very different place. And they don't, and they think the mission, the overall purpose, is understood. And people forget about it. Yeah. They really do. It's very easy to say, what were we doing? And everybody's heard about mission creep, but it is almost a mission forgetfulness. Yeah, mission bleed or something, right? It's just slowly like nature. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about a lot of the jobs I had, and I'm like, I don't know what the mission was. I mean, there's almost this like very narrowing down of what you see in front of you. I do this kind of work and I work with these people, and these are the things they want and need from me. And these are the things I want and need from people who work for me. And that effectively takes the place of the mission. My mission is to move this from here to here. My mission is to give you this thing to do that you give me back a week later, as opposed to, why are we even here? Why do we exist? I feel like, you talk about the day one thing at Amazon, and I feel like that's part of the question. When it's day one, it's a reminder to yourself, why are we here? Why do we exist? Who do we serve and why? And what helps people connect to that more? Because it's so easy to lose it. So what, in your experience, helps people make the mission more
front and center, and then helps people figure out how all the stuff that they're doing connects to it or doesn't, and they can ditch it.
Well, I think that's a key point, because if you're not doing that, then things become very mechanical. It kind of reminds me, the comedian Richard Lewis said that his grandfather used to take home movies and edit out the joy. And I think that's sometimes what we see with jobs is like, we're going to take a job which could be actually very intellectually stimulating. It's very meaningful in terms of the effect on other people, but we're going to take all that out, drain that, and then you're just going to do this and this and this. And it's we need to remind ourselves frequently to say, what is the bigger picture here? What are we really trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And what are we selling? It's the old joke about Revlon was, they were asked, what is your product? And they said, hope. And I think with certain organizations, you may have a central product, but people tend to forget it really quickly.
Yeah.
Because they have these tight little deadlines.
Yeah.
And nowadays, with remote work and things of that nature, it is hard to get away from the project to considering the relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's another interesting part of it, how the relationships are both important in and of themselves, but the relationships are often there to remind us of the purpose, the mission, what our product is, because you get those reminders through some of that communication and connection. And, one of the things I feel like I see online these days as it relates to some of this is there is a school of thought that work should be stripped down to the work itself, that it's just whatever we do is what we do. And on some level, it's like, that's great when you're talking about, bringing in missions that are not related to the mission. But I think sometimes what ends up happening is it gets stripped down well below that to the all that matters is show up and do the thing that's on your desk, and then we'll get home and do it again in the morning, as opposed to the mission. And so how do we keep, I think at a leadership level, it's sort of easier, meaning the top leaders are going to have these conversations a lot. But to your point earlier, how do we communicate often enough and effectively enough so that the people down to every level, every nook and cranny of the company maintain that awareness and are maybe inspired to include it in some of those conversations because they're actually genuinely, hopefully, a little excited or interested in it?
I think that is a fascinating point. And I can see this in organizations where there's the tangible part of the job, and then there are the intangibles.
Yeah.
And the intangibles are the people who actually advise other people. They give them tips. They show them how to simplify things. They remind them of the meaning of what they're about. And so all those relationship things, so many times are those little intangibles that are extremely valuable. But then you have, I remember one of my clients years ago with a slaughterhouse, and I was looking over job titles there, and one of the job titles was cleans brains. And, they had other ones, really narrow job titles.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought, well, that'd make a great business card. But naturally, you're going to have people who may be working in some areas where they're very, very specialized, but that's not all they do.
Yeah.
Because they affect team members, they support one another, they add to the overall pleasant climate, or they don't. And so you're having to look at those intangibles to say, gee, what do we have here? And it's important for us individually to look at it and say, I am not just doing this.
Yeah.
I'm also doing X, Y, and Z. And many times the X, Y, and Z parts are really why I'm here. Yeah, I saw years ago when I was working on equal opportunity, a person with a police department It was, in fact, it was the New York Police Department, and they were talking about recruitment. And they said, if we talk about benefits, then we have marvelous benefits, but they say that people don't react to that. We talk about community service, how we can help people react to that.
Yeah.
And it's very understandable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think many times we kind of get into the benefit realm. We're just going to talk about the nitty gritty, hard-nosed stuff.
Yeah. Which, like, it's not that people don't care about that, but it's not the magnet that draws you to the organization or to the industry or to the team or whatever, right? I mean, and I think that's true in anything. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a police work, firefighter work. The sort of mission of that is loud, right?
Yeah. Right.
I worked in advertising, and I don't think the mission there is quite as loud. But I think if you asked people, certainly people who worked in my department, which was the creative department, what appealed to them, well, it was probably two things. One was an ability to bring some self-expression into a bigger project and be a part of that. And then I think a lot of people got really drawn to the idea that you're solving a problem, if you asked somebody like, what does an advertising agency do? Well, I think they would say they help companies sell stuff, or get new customers or whatever. But you could tell that to 100 people. And I think 99, maybe 100 would go, I don't care about that. I mean, again, it's not that like you can't look at that and go, well, yeah, that's important. It helps the economy go and blah, blah, blah. But like, that's not the reason why people are showing up to do that thing. They're showing up because, to your point, you're actually connecting to their own sense of meaning and purpose and drive and motivation. And then you're helping them connect it to a team that is also sharing that and coming at it from different angles, and you're getting exposed to different ways of thinking. But it's not like, if I couldn't show up to that job and bring a piece of myself and what matters to me, I'm not working in that field for 25 plus years. And I don't think most people are. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what people are struggling with right now. I think a lot of people are feeling the lack of mission, purpose, meaning. And they're wondering like, well, where do I even get it? And some people are questioning, can I even get it in a corporate kind of a job? And I would argue you definitely can.
Yeah.
But I think it's getting harder to see for a lot of people. How do you connect those dots so people can see the broad scope of what's possible for themselves and recognize that they have agency in how they show up to that in a way that then allows them to connect to some meaning?
I think that what we need to distinguish is there's the prose and then there's the poetry. And I look at somebody at a retirement ceremony who tears up, and that person is not tearing up because of the prose. They're tearing up because of the relationships, the larger meaning, so what they were contributing.
Yeah.
Setbacks, victories, a variety of things that can be very even subtle, but that is what people are really searching for. And so when they go into a particular job, I think it is important for them to, it's going to pay this amount, it's going to have these benefits, whatever.
Sure.
But what are you really going to get from it? And what can you contribute? What difference can you personally make there? And that's where, as we look at our society and our participation in it, this is where it's really important not just to learn how to get from point A to point B. Is very important to learn, okay, how am I going to treat people along the way? What are going to be my core values? What can I do to make this a better organization?
Yeah.
Things like that. And the organizations, in turn, need to give people permission to behave that way. You're not going to be punished if you do something like that.
Yeah.
And that's key, because you see some organizations where they will be.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
they're mean places.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and even worse than mean, I think sometimes is sort of indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
There's just this quiet sort of, we're just doing what we're doing and we're almost separate from it as people. We're just plugging in to it. And I'm curious, how do you, when you're working with folks, whether it's just an individual leader or if it's a team, and you're trying to help them see some of this stuff, right? Because I imagine, and you can tell me like whatever they're showing up to you with maybe isn't this. They may not be showing up to you going, I need to help create better people and a culture that improves the sense of meaning amongst the team as well as the individuals. They might. So first question might be, what are they showing up to you with? And then how do you broaden that conversation? And maybe when do you broaden that conversation to allow them to see that there's more here than people are showing up a little bit late every morning or whatever they're coming to you with?
That's a great Sherlock Holmes type question. And I really like it, because I think what I do is I start with the structure. Because I really believe in the management maxim that organizations get the results they're designed to get. And unfortunately, many times when they're not getting those results, they, rather than looking at the way they're organized, the way they make decisions, they start looking for culprits. We have to find some people to blame. And as you get into it, I've seen this many times, no one is to blame. You've got a structure that actually encourages that. And if you change the structure, you change some of your procedures, then you're going to get the results that you want from the people. But right now, people are not dumb. When they're encountering different issues, there is usually a reason other than we've got dysfunctional people. Usually the people are in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
It's the organization that needs to be tweaked. So that's where I start initially. And then we move to how do the people connect with this? How do you bring them in on this? And are you spending a lot of time trying to search for people who may be creating problems when you really have an organization that is going to continue to do this if it's left unchecked?
What are some of those system issues that are most common in organizations, and how do you make those changes? Because there's a lot of resistance in most organizations.
Yeah. Oh, I see. One of my favorite examples was I was called in, and the chief executive officer was actually a very savvy guy. And he said, okay, I want you to go, and we have these departments, and they hate one another. And they're kind of colliding all the time. And so I met with the departments and talked to quite a few people, and it turned out they were all very nice. They were all very good, and they knew what they were doing. They had conflicting missions.
Yeah.
One was, hey, you got to please the customers, get out there and do that. And the other one was one of these departments, and it was a finance group where they were making sure everybody's following all the procedures. Well, sometimes if you're going to please the customer, you're not going to follow every procedure.
Yeah.
And so I got back with the chief executive officer, and I said, well, I found the culprit. I said, it's you. I said, you're giving these conflicting messages. And he was a great guy. And he said, you're right. He said, absolutely. And so we noticed in the organization these kind of car wrecks that were taking place, and they didn't need to be that way. And then people they stopped demonizing one another because they realized, no, this is how this is, and so we need to talk those things through and identify the problems and see what we can do to simplify it.
Yeah.
So that's one of those strange little examples of things that can go on for years.
Oh yeah, I mean, as you said it, I'm reminded of my former industry, and I do a lot of coaching in this industry and advertising, and it can often feel like every department has a separate mission, right? And when you have a cloudy company mission, that makes it even worse. Meaning, I think most ad agencies think their mission is clear, and it's probably something like, yeah, we should do good work, help the client, get new customers, blah, blah, blah. But when you go down to the departments, from the creative perspective, it's all about the work. Whatever you do, you got to make the absolute best, most standout, amazing breakthrough creative work. You get to the client service team, it's all about making sure the client's happy and feeling good about the work. You get to the sort of technical development team who's helping to build out the websites and all that stuff. And there's a lot of talk about, doing things efficiently and effectively, and which can be at odds with the creative vision sometimes, where it's like, I want to have to do all this cool stuff. And it's like, yeah, we can't do it that way. Or if we can, it costs more. And then you have production and teams who again have that same motivation or mission to be quick and efficient, and to effectively, as a creative, you feel like they're putting their hand up and saying, you can't do that a lot. I want to do this cool shot where we do this. Oh yeah, we can't do that. It's going to cost too much. Or, we don't have the right director for that, or blah, blah, blah. So this isn't even just an agency problem. It's an industry problem, right? And some places do better, but where it gets tricky is like, okay, let's just focus. Let's say the creative team and the client service team, and the creative is trying to do the best work, and the clients are trying to keep the client service trying to keep the client happy. If you show up and you go, well, you clearly have two different missions. And you're going to hear all the talk back initially. Right. Well, that's the right mission, and theirs is wrong, and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, well, how do we align? Yeah. So how do you both help people potentially release some of what they've been holding on to very tightly? And then where does common ground exist in situations like that?
Part of the key question would be, what can you not live with? Because there are going to be some things you say, well, we're not necessarily wild about that, but if we absolutely have to do it, we can do it.
Yeah.
And so you're sorting that out. I remember years ago, an attorney made a very interesting observation. He said, when you're talking to attorneys, realize that their default answer is no. And they say, can we do this? No. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is you're not being sued right now. And if you do something, you might be sued. Yeah. And so they don't like to go into the courtroom. And so they're kind of inclined to, no, just keep what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what so many organizations where you're saying, okay, we know this is not necessarily going to be your ideal thing, because in your ideal world, these other people would go away and you could just do everything your way.
Yeah.
But what can you live with? Where can you bend? Mm-hmm. And in what ways can you actually turn into allies rather than adversaries? Mm. And that opens up communication, and it puts different things on the table. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they, go dancing off into the sunset, but it does mean that they usually can work out a thing where we say, okay, this is yours, this is mine, and we talk. This is here. If something happens there, we get together and work out a deal.
Yeah. I like that. I like that there's certain maybe guardrails that get put down, or principles that get agreed upon. And then, there's this sort of 20% area that we need to actually hash it out, and it's just going to be that way. And but we still hold those broad principles, and we're still clear on what they are, and we're still clear on the company mission. So we also know, hey, how does this decision align with the principles and the mission, right?
Yeah, and that area in between is the area where that's going to be negotiated.
Yeah.
And we're going to get together even over a cup of coffee and say, okay, this is how do we resolve this? And then fine, because when the boundaries are very clearly set, you rarely have conflict.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it, right? Is there just aren't boundaries set in a lot of places. And so you just get zero to resentment in like 3 seconds. A lot, very often. Yeah. I want to touch on some stuff that you've written about in your Substack. You have a wonderful Substack. I really love your point of view on stuff. And there was an intriguing title, and then I think the piece is maybe even more so. But it was called Workplace Jackals. Yes. I think it was called, and I know we've talked a bit about sort of the structural and the challenging systemic stuff, but people are a big part of organizations and how they show up. So what is what are workplace jackals, and what can we do to manage them? And some of them are us, so I don't want to mean it's like others, right. but how do we recognize them, and how do we work within their existence?
I think that's a key question, because you have these people, they're in organizations, and they should have been fired long ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have people where organizations tolerate them, and sometimes they have some sort of special expertise, but unfortunately their people skills are such that they bring everybody down. Mm-hmm. You have some people who are just flat out lethal in terms of their lack of ethics, and you just have no real boundaries with those individuals. Mm-hmm. What I find in organizations is they tend to think that they can have a person who's technically great with lousy people skills, and that's going to be all right. Yeah. Now, if they can, hide them somewhere and slip food under the door, that's one thing. But usually what these people are doing is they wind up driving off good people. Yeah. And so the good people leave, and the people who are actually often kind of weak or pliable, they stay, and then the jackals or the weasels or the bullies, or however we put that, those people remain. And what I've noticed with organizations that actually do take action, you get rid of some of those individuals, and that workplace changes overnight. Yeah. It's just huge.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you think about things we should learn when we're becoming a leader, or if we're particularly maybe elevating into senior leadership, and that ability to recognize the jackal, the weasel, and move swiftly, and it doesn't have to mean like as soon as somebody acts like a jerk, you say you're fired. Right. But you get good at pattern recognition. You understand. You have systems in place to kind of go, okay, I'm noticing that person now. Oh, okay, that's clearly a pattern. Okay, we can't tolerate that anymore. Okay, they need to go. Right. And I think your point is spot on. When you see somebody being tolerated, it has all kinds of knock-on effects, from resentment to, maybe I could be a bit of a bully or a jackal, because apparently that's what gets rewarded around here, right? So, we all have that within us somewhere. We all have that capacity to be not nice. Yes. And if somebody starts telling me, well, that's how you succeed around here, if you got a little bit of talent and you're a jerk, go for it. Well, then, your culture's suddenly just jerk heavy. Yeah. Yeah. That's really tough. And it is amazing how, if you can remove like the root, how much impact that would then have, because everyone else will sort of naturally fall back into their comfort zone, and they'll have more respect for the leadership, and they'll feel more like, I trust the leadership because they did the right thing. But what do you think is it just fear of hurting someone's feelings, fear of recrimination? What keeps organizations hanging on to that person? Or is it, to your point, mainly just, they're so damn good, I gotta take the bad with the good?
What I find is many times they're afraid of the person. Yeah. And then they're also afraid of lawsuits. And yet I've worked with organizations where they fire people on a regular basis, and these are people who really deserve to be fired, and they'd have a system. You would sit down, and I used to advise them, you kind of have a SWAT team, bring in the lawyer, bring in the personnel people, bring in maybe a counselor or a psychologist. We're going to work this out, but everybody's going to be in the room and there's going to be a plan of action when we leave. Because, you noted that when people look around and they see that behavior tolerated, they think this is the way they run things here. Because they know that in most cases, management knows.
Yeah.
They're tolerating the person.
Yep.
And I remember in an extreme case I saw where a person was waving a gun around and going up drunk and doing all sorts of things. Well, later, and he got fired. And then later he took the organization to court. And an executive there said, well, can't we just find him a desk somewhere? And I told him, I said, yeah, how about next to yours?
Yeah.
You're not the one who's having to work with this person.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, it's important to set those boundaries because people notice that. It goes to, the magic word that you uttered is trust. Yeah. Can you trust these people? Because if they let that person continue to harm people and intimidate people and things of that nature, then I don't know if I can really trust them. Yeah.
I mean, all the way up to, do I even trust what they say we're supposed to be doing here and the mission and all that stuff?
Right.
And it breaks down everything. I want to touch on, you mentioned you spent a lot of time in the equal opportunity world, and that world's certainly shifted over time and different ways of coming about that. What's your take on how should we ensure that equal opportunity is provided to people in the workplace, whether that's sort of in the public realm of things like firefighters and stuff like that, or in the more private realm of corporate jobs, small businesses, whatever. What is the right approach, given there's a lot of noise around this right now?
Right. I think that it is very important to be introspective. I think it's very important to have, and what's happened in organizations is they've jumped into diversity and they've kind of forgotten about equal opportunity. I favor the equal opportunity area because it's based heavily on the law. We had the debates years ago on this, but that also means you're going to be introspective. So you're going to check out your own procedures. And if you see something that doesn't hold up, you change it.
Yeah.
And the ground rule that I stressed was, and continue to do so, is it's more important to do right than be right. So if somebody comes in and they have a complaint, we're going to look initially to, hey, does it have merit?
Yeah.
Because if we messed up somewhere, we should settle immediately, get that thing corrected immediately. But on the other hand, if we have supervisors and employees who have behaved properly, we should back them up.
Yeah.
And we don't cave in to every demand out there. And so what that all gets down to, do you do what you say you will do? And if you're doing what you say you will do, then your credibility increases.
Yeah.
But the organizations that get into trouble in many, many cases, they talk out of both sides of their mouth. Because they'll say, oh yeah, yes, we're definitely into merit and we don't discriminate. And then they actually do discriminate.
Yeah.
And so everything is immediately flies out the window.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of gray area in the language that gets used here. I mean, you made a clear distinction between the word diversity and equal opportunity. And what I experience is, depending on your points of view on maybe either of those things, there can be a lot of conflation around those words. I think for a lot of folks who would say, well, of course I value diversity, the meaning of that often is something akin to equal opportunity. It's just the word diversity. And then I think what you're pointing towards here is, well, there's a wide spectrum of how diversity maybe gets implemented within an organization. Maybe in some organization, it is truly aligned up with the legal framework set up in the equal opportunity laws. And it's just maybe a little louder within the organization than maybe it once was. And then that seems great. Whereas others, it has a heavier hand. It can actually create discriminatory situations, and there can be interesting challenges around that. And then does the law come into play in some of those situations? And so I feel like that the conversations we have around this, and there's sort of the high level political conversation, but maybe even within the workplaces, getting clear on what we're actually talking about sometimes is the most important part. What do you mean when you say diversity, and what policies are you advocating for? And it's not to I don't think necessarily to judge. If you believe in certain policies that I don't believe in, great. Well, let's talk about them. And certainly as a company, we should certainly talk about them within the context of any legal framework and how those get enforced. But I feel like we jump ahead, right? And we just kind of go like, do you believe in this big word of whether it's diversity or some other sort of political buzzword? And if you don't, because your interpretation of that word is different than the other person's, it immediately then goes into like, you're bad, you're wrong, you're wrong, as opposed to a meaningful conversation around, listen, when you put human beings together, we're not always going to do the right thing. And that often can mean we're making hiring choices or promotion choices based on factors that we shouldn't be, and that can be discriminatory and all that stuff. And obviously you can look at the history of the country and kind of acknowledge that it was rooted in a lot of that for many years. So they're heavy conversations, but ultimately, I think to your point, we want to get down to what are the decisions we're making based on whatever this policy or set of policies is, and how do you do that, and how do you have the conversation around it within an organization when there is so much emotional, cultural weight around it?
Yeah, I start with equal opportunity.
Yeah.
And that is, okay, non-discrimination. So we're going to recruit, we're going to hire people in a non-discriminatory fashion.
Yeah.
Now, that does not mean that we're automatically going to have a diverse group.
Yeah.
Because you can, an example I like to cite is I know of a slaughterhouse and a Tupperware plant, and you're going to have more women apply at Tupperware plant than at the slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
You can be completely non-discriminatory. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
If you look at the science and math departments at universities, you're going to see a lot of Asian Americans. You're going to see a lot more Asian Americans than you're going to find with other groups.
Yeah.
And so if we have equal opportunity and we wind up with a workforce that has a large number of, say, of Asian Americans in a particular job, that's not a problem because we have not discriminated. We got the best qualified people. Now, the diversity part, to me, kicks in with how do we communicate with one another?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have very diverse communication styles. And in order to have effective communication in the workplace, we need to realize my game is not the only one in town. There are going to be other people where if you say this, they take it very differently. So we're going to learn how to communicate effectively with our coworkers and with our customers. But if there's ever a conflict between diversity and equal opportunity wins.
Yeah.
It's legally based. We have to comply with the law.
Yeah.
And that is the one which I found over the years where, everybody can put their fingerprints on that because they say, yep, should be non-discriminatory. What has happened is you will have groups that will want to discriminate in the name of diversity.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of haul them back and say, no, we're going to focus on equal employment opportunity. But this is over here is where the diversity kicks in. And we're going to continually look at our policies and our practices to see if there's any way in which we're not communicating effectively.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it can get interesting, right? Because it could be that of the 100 people a month that apply for the job, we're being non-discriminatory, but our sourcing procedures, maybe there is something exclusionary in it. We're not looking at the right places. We're not opening that door wide enough to even allow people from populations that are not coming in. So it gets like layered in that way. And then there's a part of the diversity story that gets really tricky because how it intersects with the law, but also I think it's more from a values perspective, but it also could be from a sort of quote unquote, business sense perspective. So I'll use advertising as an example. Advertising as an industry serves multiple populations of people if you break it down sort of demographically. Mm-hmm. And so as a industry, you might look at it and go, well, if African Americans are 12 to 13% of the buying population, or let's say maybe they're 40% of this particular buying population. Mm-hmm. I see value in bringing more people from that background in because it will allow us to communicate better. And on one level, my brain goes, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. And on the other level, it feels like, well, we're using a very broad brush to look at who this person is, right? You could theoretically hire somebody who's of whatever descent you're looking for, and they actually don't know that culture as well as somebody else might, right? Or they don't have the set of skills that you want, including that. So that gets into a really muddy area. How do you, if an ad agency came to you and they were thinking through some of this stuff, how would you advise them?
I would look at it initially if you're talking about people being hired by the ad agency or the type of ad that's going to be made.
People being hired because of the type of ad that's being made, right?
I would focus on the communication skills.
Okay.
And here's one of the reasons why. I've seen organizations where they say, well, we're going to hire people of this particular race or that particular race because we've got a client composition that is largely of that race.
Yeah.
Well, what I tell them is you need people who can communicate with other people. A cross section. I've seen situations where women don't communicate well with other women.
Right.
Or blacks don't communicate well with other blacks or whites with whites.
Sure.
So the key thing is what sort of communication skills do you need?
Yeah.
And then you build from there. So you can be non-discriminatory and you may well hire someone of, let's say, this person is black, but this person really knows how to communicate effectively with a wide range of people. That's great.
Yeah.
But I'm not hiring the person because the person's black or white or Hispanic. I'm hiring them for those skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's defensible. You'll win on that.
Yeah. And I understand that. And I would say, broadly speaking, I agree with it. But I know folks who are listening now, some of them probably aren't agreeing with it. And I just think we need to be able to have these conversations openly without judgment from any perspective. Meaning if somebody disagrees with you, they can go, yeah, I get that. And there's some truth in there and I can understand that. But my belief is that if we have more, black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, whatever, more women, that we're going to have a better understanding of some of those cultural touch points, regardless of communication style, because they've lived it, right?
Here's the concern I have, is that when you look at any individual, you're looking at a multiple, kind of a bundle of things. For example, I'm thinking of a person right now, Mexican-American, disabled, veteran, grandfather, variety of things like that. And you're saying, okay, which one have I hired?
Yeah.
Really, if people are very complicated. So then you're looking at, okay, can this person do what we need on this job? Because it's very dangerous if you slip into tokenism.
Yeah.
And you kind of say, well, I've got to kind of pick this person because of race, as opposed to whether this person really is what we need now.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's strange because I've seen this in the public sector a lot. They say, well, we're going to have this person, and this person is speaking for to kind of represent the Hispanic community.
Yeah.
Well, first off, they're not representing the Hispanic community, and the Hispanic community is very diverse.
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans versus Cuban Americans versus Mexican Americans. And, that's very difficult. I do like, from an advertising thing, just to note this, when Coca-Cola would do its commercials in Miami, they'd show the Coca-Cola bottle, beautiful, and it's next to a Cuban dish.
Yeah.
They would do it in New York City. They might have the Coca-Cola bottle, and it's next to a Puerto Rican dish.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
What was really neat was the members of the groups would see that, and they'd say, hey, look at that. And it didn't offend anyone else.
Yeah, it's culturally aware, but not sort of culturally dependent, I guess, maybe is
That's
the
right.
in there. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you make a great point about, like that phrase, right? I contain multitudes, right? It's like, who am I really? And how much do we want to weigh any one factor? I mean, the example I can think of is I am not a parent, but I've worked on things where I've told stories about parents. Like I can do that, and it may be useful that I can talk to other folks around the table who have some of that, but I've also been parented. I have parents, you know what I mean? Like there are different ways of gaining some of that cultural awareness beyond simply wearing that identity jacket, so to speak. Yeah. I just think there's so much energy, bad energy in some of these conversations. And if we could just have better energy around it, then I think we'd make a lot more progress with them. It just feels like everyone's trying to like hammer each other as opposed to just kind of like sit back and go, tell me your perspective. And then I want to be able to share my perspective. And then we don't have to agree, but at least we can try to understand. And I think that's the root of so much of this. When you talk about communication, we use communication as a persuasion tool, which has its place, but we often forget its value in a tool of understanding, and which then becomes a tool of empathy and an ability, a tool of relation to each other. And, coming back to your idea of helping us become better people, what kind of people are we creating within a society? I feel like that's pretty core to that. If we could just understand each other a little better.
I agree. I tell my clients frequently, do not have a policy or a practice that you cannot shout from the rooftops. If you're reluctant to disclose that, that's an alarm bell.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that.
Well, really, it kind of, because they kind of lean back and say, well, you're saying, no, that's it. You got to have enough confidence in that.
Believe it or not.
You can tell everyone, this is how we handle this.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's such a good measurement, because it immediately you're going to react like, well, some of my stuff, sure. But those three things over here.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked a bit about humanity, and I'm curious. I know I've seen you write some things about AI, and you had an interesting take. You used this phrase, reverse decision making, as a way of dealing with some of the challenges. So quickly, what's your take on AI? And then what is reverse decision making?
Well, my take on AI is I'm sure I'm just as baffled as everyone else in terms of where is it going? Is it going to be some sort of bubble?
Yeah.
Where people look back and say, well, it wasn't that big of a deal. I get very nervous when you see people who kind of think, gee, this would be marvelous and it would put a lot of people out of work, but we don't talk about them. We're just talking about how marvelous it's going to be. I'm worried about it kind of turning human beings into robots, and we become less than human. And I think right now people want genuineness. They kind of sense that things are so fast, hurried, that you may have these marvelous inventions, but people do not tend to take out the time to question what are the possible downsides. Reverse decision making is one where if you're looking at a decision, you say, okay, now if we were going to screw this up, if we were going to create a disaster, what would we do? and you start listing things. And the reason why that's helpful is sometimes you say, well, we're actually doing that.
Yeah.
or we were about to go down that road.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps to kind of give the possible monsters, kind of raise those things and say, these are some real downsides.
Mm-hmm.
Because, right now in the AI thing, for example, people talk about, gee, you could have all these self-driving trucks and they could really work out. And I have to admit, and I remember talking to some people in a jail a number of years ago, and these are juvenile delinquents. For many of them, a truck driver job would be a dream job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those are jobs, and it's a huge number of people in the workplace that actually drive trucks.
Yeah.
You're going to get rid of that, and you're not considering what are you doing to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of those areas where I think it was Sam Rayburn years ago when he was Speaker of the House said the three most important words in the world are wait a minute. And I feel that way with AI. I kind of think, I'm reasonably well read on this stuff, but I'm not really sure just where it is going.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think anybody who thinks they know where it's going is either delusional or lying or trying to sell you something.
I think you're right.
But, I think I think the people who are saying, wait a minute, you can go a little heavy handed with that. And then it's like, people are talking about, let's stop AI. Let's put it back in the box. That was the big thing like a year or two ago. I'm like, you can't put this thing back in the box. It's out. Right. And then it's like, well, let's regulate it in this way, that way, or that way. And, I'm not against all regulation, but I also recognize if you sort of smother it in regulation, you sort of have put it back in the box. And then there's no opportunity for it to provide all of the possible upsides, which is that other exercise of like, whether it's curing diseases or things like that it has the potential to help us with. So it's an art form, I think, for us to be able to say both, wait a minute, and let's not say, wait a minute, and have that be only a negative thing, like what could possibly go wrong. Let's make sure we're paying attention to what could also possibly go right so that the conversation is full, right?
Yeah, the wait a minute implies that there's a time limit to the waiting.
Yeah.
And it's not indefinite.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I think the exciting thing is, you could have cures for diseases. You could have just a variety of really neat things.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where people justifiably get excited about it. It's just one of those things where it's like that old expression, you want me to buy a pig in a poke. In other words, I really don't know what this product looks like, and you want me to buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just simply like, wait a minute, let's ask a few questions.
Yeah, right? That's right.
Your example of the truck drivers, you might get to the reality of like, I don't know if we want to go so quickly with that. We want to give ourselves time to absorb and figure out where those folks are able to then go. But you might go, actually, this is just a thought, but if we're able to, the long haul trucking gets taken over by AI up to 90%, that it will maybe create room for 90% more short haul truck driving jobs, because we're going to be actually moving more stuff and we need more drivers. And that's much harder to do with AI, because once you get into the local spaces, the technology isn't as good. And you might be like, well, that's a trade that I'm comfortable with, because then a lot of those folks who maybe would have done the long haul can do the short haul, and that's great, right? But you need to ask the question first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned the idea of remote work and some of the challenges with that. What's your sort of broad take on remote work? And then coming out of that, like what would the best version of a remote or hybrid workplace look like to you?
Gee, in general, I'm not wild about it, because one of the big advantages of work involves the relationships and the little intangibles. And I remember during COVID, one of the things I noticed was how many of those little sidebar conversations, those hallway conversations were not being held.
Yeah.
And so I tell people when they, especially younger people, I tell them, well, if you want to get promoted, you go into work. You get in there because then they get to know you.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I can certainly understand people with small children, for example, where being able to work remotely at various times of the week can make a big difference. So there's kind of a trade-off, but in general, I think there's a reason why you want to have your team acquainted with one another, and they have those informal conversations, because those often can be some of the most valuable things in the workplace.
Yeah. So let's say, and this is definitely a hypothetical, although I'm sure there are companies who feel this way because maybe they've hired distributed teams and that's where they are, even if they'd like to become more in person. But if you have a fully or mostly remote company right now, what would you suggest to them to help encourage or create more of those relational connections?
I'd certainly make sure that people who are remote are appointed to committees on different projects. So they're brought in as much as possible. People get to know them. You need to set aside time, I think specific time, where people are going to get together and brainstorm on issues, and you're going to have people from all around the organization. If you have people that are working internationally, I think it's important to understand what are some of the challenges they're facing, because they may be facing ethical issues and things of that nature working in other countries that they're not going to encounter here.
Yeah.
And that can also pose a problem, because if they wind up cutting corners in some other part of the world, then are they going to be cutting corners here?
Yeah.
And so it's more of a communication challenge.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's insurmountable.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I like that remote is at least in the mix. And I think I actually like working with folks who have remote and hybrid teams, because I think some of those challenges are really interesting, and coaching people around communication is one of my favorite things to do, because I think we're pretty bad at communication, whether we're sitting right next to somebody or we're 3,000 miles away through a screen. And helping people, build some of those tools, I think, is really important. I want to come back to this idea of being pro-human. What do you think is the most pro-human thing that any one of us could do right now to improve our connection with others?
We need to listen. I think that's very, very important. Everybody, it's as if there's this assumption that listening skills come naturally, and of course they don't. And by listening, I'm also saying we need to have a healthy skepticism that we have in fact communicated. Because that's the assumption. Well, we told them this, or we informed them about that, but maybe we didn't.
Yeah. That's a great one.
Some pretty heavy editing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think if and when my wife listens to this, she'll nod her head along with that, because we get into this sometimes. I tend to move through things a little more quickly than my wife does in terms of how we communicate. And I'm sure this is not uncommon in certain relationships, but I'll be like, we talked about that.
Right.
I'll be like, I don't feel like we did. That's kind of what you're getting to.
True. That's a great example. And this way you're periodically revisiting and say, are we still where we thought we were on this 2 weeks ago? Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And even just the act of closing out the conversation with, are we clear?
Right.
Here's kind of what I heard. Does that sound right to you? Are we both clear on that? And then you might be done and you can move on, but you might be like, oh, we're actually not there yet. Yeah.
Well, and I think in that conversation is that, okay, here's my picture of how this thing operates. This is what we're going to be doing. This is what we're going to be avoiding.
Yeah.
We're going to go this far, but not that far, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that helps.
Yeah. I love that. Like having a framework for how we can align on a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of conversations, what conversation do you feel like we're not currently having that we should be in general?
I think that we should be having more of a conversation about introspection, checking ourselves out.
Yeah.
Because, as one of the things, and I tell this to my kids about how you get to a point and you look back on decisions that you made 20 years ago or whatever, and you're thinking, who made that decision? Well, you were a different person.
Yeah.
And you make decisions based upon the information you have, and they're not necessarily going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it helps to just sit down and go through that introspection and say, where am I? One thing that I've told clients over the years is at least once a week, try to get off by yourself, maybe go to a library, go to a coffee shop, and just ask yourself, what am I overlooking? And it's shocking to me because I thought that was okay. That's kind of motherhood and apple pie type stuff.
Yeah.
But I've actually had people get back and say, I went there and I sat at that coffee shop and I realized I'd completely forgotten about a major project.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do.
Oh, really easy to do. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's that fear of what we're overlooking. I think that, I don't know, it shows up in those weird dreams you have where it's like you're back at school and you forgot to go to a class all semester, or you forgot the final exam or something like that. I think we often wonder if we're missing something. And what I would say underneath that maybe is even deeper is like, are we actually like missing out on the really important thing? You know, there's the example of the project, and it might be important, but then there's like, am I losing the plot?
Yeah.
I think that is something we all often fear. Like, have I just gotten caught up in the stories of the moment versus the bigger story? What do you think work's going to look like in 5 years?
I'm actually feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that we're getting away from some societal craziness. I think we're going to be talking to one another a lot more. I think that there will be some answers to some of the issues related to artificial intelligence. I think, too, that a lot of the organizations that we've relied on before are going to go through dramatic changes. I don't think the universities are going to look the same 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. I think there are a lot of things that could be done that could make them much more customer oriented, nimble. And so that's what I'm looking for in terms of organizations. Make sure you don't get locked in at a time when you really should be much more flexible.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's particularly tricky for deeply rooted institutions, right? So universities obviously being one of those, certainly are sort of political and other sort of institutions, but large established corporations, to your point. It's tough. There's a lot of work to be done if you want to become more flexible and more customer focused. So I've asked you.
I think as Americans, there's an item I tend to stress, and that is one of my hobbies is I study revolutions. And the thing about the American Revolution is the only major revolution where the revolutionaries questioned themselves. I mean, you look at the French Revolution, they thought they were marvelous. We just get the right people in, we're going to be marvelous. Same thing with the Russian, Iranian, Chinese, you go through all these. But the American revolutionaries were unique in that they said, we may be pretty bright, but we're not that bright. And you really need to design a system to restrain whoever happens to be in.
Yeah.
And I think that I let that spill over into management and life in that you need to sit down and listen to people with whom you disagree.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it also nods to the importance of, systems and building them with enough intelligence that they can adapt over time, but also be rooted in some profound principles and finding that balance. Yeah. Do you have a question that you'd like to pose to our audience about any of the stuff we've been talking about?
I guess the question I'd ask them to think about is, how can I better connect with other people? Mm-hmm. What can I do to help the community? What can I do to help other people? Because there are people out there who are hurting.
Yeah.
And there are people out there who are lonely and disconnected, and they have serious doubts about what the next few years are going to look like. And I think it's very important to kind of embrace those people and to connect and to try to bring hope to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's huge. I think if I was to extrapolate that into a at least nationwide mission, that would feel pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it continues. If you'd asked me about that 20 years ago, I would hope I would have come up with pretty much the same answer. I think it's a continuing mission.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. What if you could wave a magic wand and create a fully desuckified or ProHuman work world? What does that world look like?
It's one that is patient. It has certain core values that it's going to strive to uphold. Mm-hmm. And it's one in which it has a lot of introspection. There's intellectual curiosity. Mm. People, they check, each organization regularly checks itself out and says, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So I invite all my guests to make a sound effect on this show. You'll hear some cat sounds and others on the show. I'm going to invite you to make one if you have one.
Now, I'd say my sound effect is going to be one of maybe it's a slow silence, because I'm not good at sound effects, so I'm going to have to opt out of that.
I like that. I think silence is its own sound, and it actually has a lot of value. That's one of the things when I've been training in some of my work to become a coach, that the power of silence is actually one of the greatest tools in a coach's toolbox. To just be comfortable sitting in silence, because more thought, and then something will come. And there's a trust in that I think, and that relates, I think, to this broader idea of just how fast we're moving. We're filling in all the gaps, right? Mm-hmm. And to your point, let's just give ourselves some gaps. Wait a minute. Introspection, that requires a little bit of silence. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's really, I sometimes in dealing on projects, I just have to say, I wish I could give you a magic answer now, but I really have to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, really. And it's
and being comfortable saying that.
As a consultant, I told I had a meeting just around a week ago, and I was telling him, blame me. That's part of my job. You can say, well, the crazy consultant came in and said this, just blame me.
Absolutely.
Because you really need more time to think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's another habit that we've maybe lost, is the ability to say, I need some time to think about something, and to have that be rewarded as a sign of wisdom and not a sign of, not moving fast enough or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. So how do people find you, Michael? How can they track down your writing and your consulting work and all that good stuff?
My consulting work can be found at execupundentconsulting.com. Mm-hmm. I also have a blog at execupundent.com. And there will be links on the blog to the Substack. You can look me up on Google with the Substack. I still have to get a nifty Substack address.
Okay.
So still working that one out.
Okay. Well, we'll provide all that for people so they can track you down. And of course, obviously, Google still works, so we can always do that too. So, Michael, I really appreciate this conversation. I mean, it's always fun to talk to you. Today, I feel like we got into some heavy stuff, some meaty stuff, some important stuff, some pressing stuff, and some timeless stuff. And I really appreciate that.
Well, it's been a real pleasure being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Michael for bringing a wise look at the world of work to the show. You can follow Michael on LinkedIn and check out his site at execupunditconsulting.com. And be sure to read his Substack newsletter as well. It's awesome. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to help your teams bring their absolute best to work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. Type meow in the calendar invite, and I'll also send you a free DesuckifyWork t-shirt. Bye, everyone.